Okay, so hi everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for the second event in a kind of mini Lunch and Learn webinar series on invasive Phragmites. So apologies again that we had to cancel our last event, but I'm really excited that we were able to reschedule for today. So my name is Elsie Lewison, and I'm the Development Officer at the River Institute. And for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we're a not-for-profit environmental research, education, and outreach center based in Cornwall, Ontario. And we're currently involved in a couple of ongoing collaborative projects related to invasive Phragmites management and outreach, and that includes a project that's supported by the Canada Water Agency's Eco Action Program. So thanks to them for their support. And we are also involved in the Eastern Ontario Phragmites Management Area, or PMA. And this is one of a number of PMAs under the broader Ontario Phragmites Action Program. And our PMA includes the Raisin region and most of South Nation watersheds. And if you're not yet involved in a PMA and are interested in becoming involved in one, please feel free to reach out to me and I'll put my email in the chat for you. Also, if you weren't able to join us for our webinar in January with Megan Ward on ecosystem impacts of Phragmites removal in Point Pelee National Park, you can check out the recording on YouTube, and I'll put a link to the YouTube recording in the chat as well. So with that, I'm really happy to introduce Meredith Crouch. Meredith is a site environmental advisor for Ontario Power Generation's Niagara operations. She's an environmental engineer and has been with OPG for over 15 years and in Niagara for the past 10 years or 9 years. And Meredith is going to be sharing with us about OPG's goat grazing program for Phragmites control. And we're also joined by Nancy Laser, who is the Environment, Chemical, and Safety Technician for OPG's Niagara operations. And Nancy has been with OPG for over 20 years and in Niagara for the past 11 years and has played a really key role in initiating the Goats for Phragmites program. So really excited to have both of them with us today. And questions are very welcome. Please feel free to share them in the chat whenever they come to mind, and we'll answer them at the end. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Meredith.
Thank you, Elsie. Hello, everyone. So we're joining you here today from Niagara operations at the Sir Adam Beck 1 generating station. And we'd just like to take a brief moment before we start our discussion about goats to acknowledge the lands and territories of the Indigenous people who came before us and to use these lands and steward these lands and continue to do so for the generations to come. And I know that we're all joining from all over Ontario, so take a moment and think about the community that you are within and reflect on the importance of their stewardship and of your stewardship as well of this land. All right. So I'm going to chat with you a little bit about Ontario Power Generation's use of goats in vegetation management practices with a focus on our use with the goats for Phragmites. So we're going to be going over these topics today. So you can see it's a bit of a jammed time, but I think you'll hopefully get a lot out of this with a nice overview of why we got into this and some of the things that we had to work through in working this program, and then where we're going with this program going forward. So just to start you off with a little thought from Vincent van Gogh, but more importantly, your first go to the presentation. And you'll get lots of them. Nancy is very good at taking fabulously cute photos of goats. So who we are. We're Ontario Power Generation, and more specifically, we're the Niagara operations of Ontario Power Generation. So Ontario Power Generation produces power for Ontario. We produce about half of the electricity in Ontario through our various fleets. Nancy and I both work at the Sir Adam Beck and well, actually Niagara generating. And so here you can see Beck is the middle right photo there, the Beck 1 and 2 stations on that photo. And so we're down in Niagara. So here you can see the locations of the Niagara stations and control structures that Nancy and I provide support for, and where goats have been implemented in programs supporting these stations. All right, some background on how we got into goats. So as we know, European Phragmites has swept through Ontario, in particular Southern Ontario, over the past 15 to 20 years, and has really taken a foothold in a lot of places. It can be very competitive, or actually it outcompetes the native species often once it gets into especially disturbed areas. So ditches are a prime location for them. So in Niagara, we have what we call the pump generating station. It's a station that is able to pump water up into a storage reservoir during off-peak hours, and then produce power through the station from that storage from the water, using the water from the storage reservoir during on-peak. So we have this large reservoir. It's right by the Highway 405 and here in Niagara-on-the-Lake. And it has ditches all the way around, and it also has a dam safety program for ensuring that the dam that is holding this reservoir is in good shape. A few years ago, we ran into an issue where our piezometers, which are part of our dam safety program, stopped reading any water occurrences. So usually in a rain event, they would read that there had been water during that rain event. But in this one area that is highlighted in yellow, the Phragmites had gotten so thick that the Phragmites was sucking all the water in rain events before it ever reached our piezometers. So this was raised as a concern by production and dam safety and the services group who mow that area historically. And so we had to look into what to do. So previously we had been doing mowing and chemical control on our sites for vegetation. And in this particular location, we had been doing mowing, and it was just getting thicker and thicker and thicker instead of going away. So they weren't working and they weren't suitable for this location. And so we had to look into some other options. Nancy took this on and began quite an extensive research project on this. One of the ones that she looked at was the rare work where they were doing some test patches, sort of like 20 by 20 patches, and they were getting, they tried it with spading, moving the Phragmites with spading, using goats, using herbicides, and using infrared treatment. So you can see here some images that show sort of the effects in that testing that Rare was doing. And so Nancy dug into this a little bit more, and we kind of had that aha moment for goats. We thought, all right, there's no chemicals, so you're not having that concern around in water and chemicals and that sort of thing. It has reduced manual labor, and it promotes plant succession. There's no reporting and permitting requirements related to the goats. It's cost comparative, and the seeds are destroyed. And that was one of the most important things for us in this location as we started pushing this trial forward, is with the mowing practices, the seeds were getting mobilized and then they were just reseeding and we were just getting more and more. We needed something that was going to reduce and it was going to be able to take care of those seed heads and make them not viable for us. And then we also wanted the land to be able to grow native plants and vegetation. So this really worked out. And so Nancy jumped through many hurdles and did many presentations to management and the like, and there we started the trial. Okay, so the trial. So first we had to make the case. As we mentioned, we needed to show why we should do this, why we should be spending that money. And here are some pictures of that area that has the Phragmites. So we talked about that human safety mitigation. It's a very steep slope there. It can be challenging for mechanical, for access and mechanical removal. You know, there's some concerns in some locations with road safety and visibility. In this location, we had concerns with our dam safety, piezometers, the equipment, and then we also spoke to the fact of the removal by the goats would help to bring back the native species, which helps with that biodiversity impacts and improvement in biodiversity. And for Ontario, we would be the first to do this at a commercial scale, like at a large field scale. And so that's also, it was one of our case-making reasons for our company is that, you know, we like to lead where it makes business sense. And this one it did. So in the first year, we got the goats out there and they grazed twice in that year, once in the later summer and once in the earlier fall. So that first grazing, you can see here, you know, we had a thick stand of Phragmites, a little bit of a couple of trees as well, but mostly Phragmites. And the Phragmites had gone to seed. So when the goats were going through on that first one, they're getting those seed heads. It was really tall. And you know, actually, we weren't sure that they were going to go for it. You know, we thought it was really tall, maybe too thick, but they did, as you can see, because that second picture is after the grazing. They ate it right to the ground, everything in sight. Yeah, a good cleared out all that Phragmites. You can see a good progress there in that first year. So let's chat a little bit about some of the successes and challenges we found in those years. So one of the great successes we had was we put some sheep in with our goats in that first year. That helped to get the goats used to the area, keep them calm, get them used to this idea of doing this. Then we did get eradication of our Phragmites in that ditch. So we had over 90% removal. We got buy-in from management as well as from our trades teams. They saw that this actually worked, that this did reduce the workload, that it did get a better result. And then we also did some work on documenting our results and like what we were expecting and what we got. And so then we'll chat about some of the challenges. So one of the biggest issues is finding a farmer who was willing to do this program with us in Ontario, because it hadn't been done in Ontario before. So there was nobody who was contracting out these services prior to this. So we had to go find a farmer, convince them that they wanted to do this. And then we did it. Then we also had issues with the timing of the grazing. So Nancy did a lot of research and she found that you really want to hit the grazing right. You want them to just be about to produce their seed heads so that they've used all that energy, and then you eat it away, eat the vegetation away, and that helps to attack the rhizomes and keep them from replenishing with their energy. And that you wanted to do it multiple times. So we thought we were going to need to do it 3 times in order to achieve that eradication. We actually found that 2 times in a season can be successful. And then We did have, I said there were successes with management and trades, but there was also some challenges there. We had to do a lot of presentations. We had to bring people out in the field to see it. We had to work through that. One little part of our area got mowed by somebody who just couldn't believe it was going to work the day before we were supposed to start. So we had to be a little bit flexible and adjust and that sort of things. But we did eventually get through that. So, that's why it's both a success and a challenge. We got to that spot, but it took quite a lot of work to get there. And then also that documenting of the results and the actual results. And you'll see, like, sometimes we didn't think through the, like choosing this is where our camera is going to be, and we're going to get that exact same picture, but we got like pictures of the same areas, but those are things we might do differently in other ones in the future. So here you can see the goats in 2020 before they ate that first time. They're just out there for their first day. And then you see in 2024 that same area, and we do not have the regrowth of Phragmites in that area. We've got some rushes and such, but we've eradicated. So it shows the success of this trial. All right, at that point, like, we had success in our trial, and it was, where are we going from there? So that's where we came up with our program. And so we have a few components in our program. We have Phragmites for control for dam safety. So that, again, that's where these ditches where we might want to, with the trial ditch and an adjacent area, where we can use the goats to get in there and get the Phragmites out of that area. And then it goes back to a more common vegetation practice that's often mowing in this area. But it's a good tool to get for that purpose. Then we now also have Phragmites for control for biodiversity. So now we have taken the opportunity to choose a few other locations on site. So here you're seeing a progression of the goats eating before the goats arrive, a huge stand of Phragmites near our warehouse. And then the goats are there eating, and then they're heading home at the end of their week of eating this area. And so really good to see. And that was just for biodiversity. We just wanted that to turn back over to meadow instead of being a big Phragmites field. And you can see the herding dog down here one of the days, keeping an eye on things. So in our program, we used herding dogs with shepherds, and our goats went home in their trailer at the end of the day and then would come back for the next day. And that's partly due to the location that we are in, with a lot of public and employees around. You could also have a program where you have a guardian dog and you leave the goats overnight, and you'd have to decide if your location is suitable for that based on possible interactions with public or wildlife. And then we moved into some other invasive vegetation management. So we had some buckthorn in an area, and we sent the goats in there and they ate it up, did a great job, cleared that right out for us. And so, and through our research, they are able and willing to eat things like poison ivy, poison sumac, poison oak, buckthorn, Phragmites, so they can have a purpose greater than just the one species for removal on your site. And then we moved into vegetation management in general. So this location here that you're seeing is at our DQ 1 generating station in St. Catharines, and it has a fairly steep slope with its penstocks. The black round things are our penstocks. They feed the water down to the station from the headworks reservoir at the top. And we were getting issues with weeds and build up on that slope. We've been using chemical control on that slope for a few years, and we got to a situation where we had just weeds and bare patches. We're getting some slope destabilization concerns, and so we needed vegetation, but ideally not long-rooted weeds or any woody vegetation. And so the idea was had by our field services group, so our trades folks, that maybe the goats could work here. So that's where we're talking about that buy-in from the group. So we went from a situation where they're mowing an area we were trying to do a trial in to them suggesting areas we can use the goats. So now the goats come at least once a year for a few weeks at a time, sometimes twice a year. I think most often twice a year. I'm seeing from Nancy 2 to 3 times a year. And they come for a few weeks at a time. They graze the slope, then they come back a little while later and graze the slope. We have a need for the vegetation to stay below a certain height for our inspection purposes. And so that's why we need to have them in and eat that up for us. And so now this program here is actually what is driving our biodiversity program with the goats. They come in to do this, and our management gets an extra week of them to do something for us at one of the biodiversity areas. So I just wanted to chat a little bit about outside of OPG. So when we were first getting into this, goatscaping was very popular in the US and in Western Canada. And so Nancy was doing when she was doing her research, she found a lot of information from those areas. But there were very few Canadian companies operating in the commercial goatscape business, just like 3 or 4 out west. But now Ontario is seeing a rise in goatscaping companies. I believe that there are at least 3 now operating and another couple that are getting going in Ontario. And often it will be local farms that are employed to do this, partly because transporting goats huge distances is not always cost effective. But that's sort of what you'll see. So if you're looking into a goat scaping program for yourselves, you will have more options now in Ontario. So that's really good news. All right, so what are our next steps? We're doing education. We're educating our own staff as well as others. So conservation authorities, industry, parks. Nancy does a lot of presentations and meetings. We have people out to site to see our goats in action. Our goats, the farm's goats. But yes, the company does sort of take, and you can see here also that we have are now employing sheep as well. So we have sheep at our Nanticoke solar location. And I just wanted to bring that in because, goats are really good for certain things like eating Phragmites and buckthorn and stuff like that. Sheep don't really like to eat those things. But they are not good for grazing around delicate equipment. They definitely have a stubborn and silly and curious nature. And loose wires and delicate panels will become playthings or food. Whereas the sheep will just eat their grass as long as you've put the right grass down, and so that's perfect for like a solar installation. And the goats are great for our ditches and our pen stocks. But just think that through when you're trying to figure out if this is the right kind of a program for you. What is your purpose and what's your location? So for Phragmites, sheep, no. Goats, yes. And a little bit of a conversation about costs for you. So this just gives you a sense of how much OPG is spending on goats. It's not a cheap program. And now I will make a quick note that just due to our contracting requirements and insurance requirements, we switched to having the farm subcontracted through a other contractor in 2021. So there was a cost increase at that point because you kind of get that overhead cost coming, but it solved some concerns for us around insurance and things. But that's something for you to think about, and just some ballpark numbers to give you an idea, and different depending on how you set up your program, these costs will adjust a little bit because, if you're leaving the goats with a guardian dog overnight, you don't have to have them going back and forth, depends on how many goats you have. That's another thing we've increased the number of goats on the site doing this work over the years. So I think we started with, correct me if I'm wrong, 20 15 goats in our first year in 2020. And we're now up to 50. So, that's also going to have an impact on our costing. Okay, and then the next thing we're doing is we're looking at partnership opportunities because, as we just said, goats are expensive, and farmers who are running goat scaping programs want their goats to be working most of the working season. And if you're not trying to hire them for the whole of that working season, then you want other people in your area using it too, so that it's viable for your farmers to keep this as a business. So that's important. So you're partnering with your provider or farmer. You're also partnering with other organizations in the area who might want to use that, and that be that industry or government or parks or educational institutes. And really, those partnerships are imperative to long-term success of a program, because it allows for your company to, increase or decrease your usage of a goat with a bit more flexibility if there are other people increasing and decreasing as well. So that, it's a competitive market with a sustainable program. And that brings me to the end of our presentation and time for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Meredith. This is really interesting to learn about, and lots of great pictures of goats. Very, very cute. So it looks like we have quite a few questions in the chat, so I can just read them out. So Jackie asked, how long was the grazing period? So I know you mentioned kind of 2 grazing periods in the first year, and like how long do you generally have the goats out?
So it depends a little bit on your location, the size of your location, how long that's going to need to be. So as mentioned in the first study area, it was 2 weeks.
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
Oh, 3 weeks. Okay.
For the first eating of that study area. So that first study area, we did 3 weeks there. The later picture where there was a picture with the warehouse behind, we had 1 week, but we had more goats. So
Yeah.
Okay.
3 weeks with 15 goats in the first year, it was 3 weeks and then another 3 weeks. So 6 weeks all told. And then that second warehouse photo a few years later with I want to say we had like 40 goats that year.
40, yeah.
Yeah, around 40. And it was 1 week for that area.
Okay.
So yeah, it depends on how many goats, how big the area, how dense the vegetation.
Yeah, I just to say that we had the 15 goats for the 3 weeks in that ditch that had never been eaten. They ate 49,800 square feet.
Wow.
And that was hard because they had never been cut. They were so thick that they went through them quite slowly. And also because they were new at it. What we have learned is that they learn. And they learn how to help each other to get the seed head down. So they work together to bend over the tall, seed heads, and they go at it much faster.
I think we have a photo of that. Let me see if I can go back to it.
Yeah, they're pretty smart.
Yes, yeah, they are.
So I guess while you're pulling that photo up, Lena asked, do the goats also remove or affect the roots of the Phragmites so that it's fully eradicated, or do they only eat the new growth? Yeah, so I guess like your experience with how, because I know a lot of the like regeneration of Phragmites is through the root system. So I don't know if you have any like comments on like how it's impacting those root systems.
Yeah, so that's the one where Nancy did all this research and figured out that you want to eat at a certain moment in order to get the best impact on the Phragmites. So if you let these Phragmites grow until it's just about to form its seed head, then get the goats to eat it. It's used like tons of energy getting to that spot. The Phragmites have, and then you have the goats eat it. So then that takes a lot of the root energy away. And so the roots don't have as much stored energy. And then you need to do that again once or twice more, depending on how thick your stand is and other factors, right? In order to sufficiently deplete the energy in the roots. And so that's why there's those gaps between we get the grazed it, then we let it grow back up till it's just before its seed head, graze it again,
Yeah.
And then you can do that 2 to 3 times. And then and as mentioned, we had, with the 2 times in the first summer, we had an 80% reduction. And then the third time that next fall, and that next spring, saw eradication.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean, I imagine that the mechanism is maybe a bit similar to like the spading technique, is sort of, yeah, kind of cutting the plant off after it's put a lot of energy into the growth, and then, yeah.
Yeah.
And then the revegetation of what is, because now they're fertilizing the top layer of soil, right? So what is growing then afterwards is helping choke out the Phragmites as well.
Okay.
So you're kind of getting a double action.
Yeah, so you get the native plants coming back in with the newly fertilized soil.
Great. I think we had just a question from Nicole related to that, was a question of whether native species and seed mixes were applied to the areas cleared to ensure that opportunistic species didn't try to take root.
We had that thought, but we never got that far.
Okay.
That was not management buy-in at this point. It was like, do our piezometers work? Yes, good.
Right.
Yeah.
So that might be a next round of testing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that would increase your success with the, because we were sort of relying on the successional neighboring plants. And I mean, when you have a sort of a longer, narrow strip, that might be more reasonable to expect, whereas a bigger area.
Yeah. I know you mentioned the goats being effective with like a number of different invasive species, and Jackie asked specifically about wild parsnip. I don't know if wild parsnip is a big issue in your area.
We haven't tried wild parsnip for them.
Okay.
They do eat it though.
Yeah,
okay.
Our research says they will.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's good to know. It's a big issue out here, I know. And actually a question about goat health. I guess a question as to whether there was any kind of precautions taken around sort of like ensuring that the goats weren't eating chemicals that were applied beforehand.
Oh, yeah, we had a period of no chemical use before the goats, and we always have that. If there's an area we're looking at for the goats, we have a period of no chemical use in that area to ensure that there's not going to be any issue for the goats. Yeah, I mean, that's any farmer that you're working with is going to want to make sure that their stock is healthy, and that the work they're doing for you isn't going to put them at risk. And then actually further, Nancy can probably elaborate a little bit about the preheating, that your farmer did.
Oh yeah, that they're not just taking them right from the farm, from the the dry old hay and alfalfa. So they're actually working the goats a couple hours a day and longer before they go all day out on their jobs. But also, if you're dealing with just one species, like in this case, that all there was to eat was Phragmites in certain areas, our farmer was very flexible into looking into, are they getting the right nutrition by just eating this type of, and so in this case it was psyllium that they had to have an additive like for when they went home. But in most cases there's a variety of vegetation that they are getting all the nutrition that they need, and the goats are actually inspected before they go back in the trailer at home. They're looking at them just to make sure there's no weight loss or anything isn't wrong with them, and if they do consider that, they're keeping them home and doing a little bit more testing on them to make sure that they're going to stay healthy.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's a lot of kind of goat health considerations that most people might not come to mind at first.
There's not very many poisonous plants for them, and just to let you know, on the penstocks area, there was this purple type of flower, and they wouldn't touch it. And luckily enough, at the farm, it's a herding farm that they teach herding, and so there was a student who's a botanist. And she looked at it and she told us what it was. Of course, I can't remember, but that's actually poisonous to goats. And so they're pretty smart too on knowing what they can eat and not. What we did, there was only about 6 or 7 plants. And what we did was actually spaded them out, just making sure that, nobody was curious enough to try it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Another kind of question about goat physiology. I think you'd mentioned the seed destruction. If they eat the seeds, is it are the seeds destroyed by their stomach acids? Do you know?
Yeah, they're not viable in their poop. Yeah.
Okay.
So once the goat eats that, it's just fertilizer.
Great.
Mhm.
And then a question from Kelly. How much, in your estimation, about how much area can be managed in a day or a week? I guess that might kind of come back to that question about sort of number of goats and specifics of the area.
Yeah, you're gonna depend on what vegetation, how thick that vegetation is, how many goats you're gonna be using in the area. So I would suggest that the surface providers, the farmers who now do this, would be better able to tell you how much, give that estimate based on your circumstance.
And I guess kind of related to that, I don't know, are there resources out there that kind of provide estimates for like kind of how many goats per hectare or per given area are recommended?
Well, they do, the other outfits, they do give an estimate, but again, until they see the area, they're not gonna say an acre a day or something like that, because they gotta know what exactly that they're eating, what kind of terrain it is,
Right.
all that, yeah.
Okay, yeah, so fairly context dependent. So we have another question. It's wonderful to be replacing mechanical CO2 generating and chemical, or yeah, CO2 generating and chemical remediation of weeds with animals. Oh yeah, so this was kind of coming back to the humane treatment. So it sounds like, I mean, the farmers in particular are quite conscientious about the health of their animals.
Yes.
Well, I mean, that presumably you have we work with farmers who are conscientious about the health of the animals, because that would matter to us too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we made sure there's always a shade place for them to go, usually their trailer.
Yeah.
There's always water for them. And then we have them coming in and out, because in our locations, we don't feel it would be safe for them to stay overnight.
No, there's a lot of coyotes.
And that sort of thing. So yeah, like you have to think through, and also working with the farmers to sort of ramp their stomachs up to eating the stuff, and then also making sure there's any supplements, and all those things are a consideration. And if you're looking into a goat organization, those would likely be things you might want to think about if you're looking at them.
Yeah. I guess so. There's a lot of questions around kind of the number of goats per hectare, or also cost per hectare. I'm trying to remember, in your budget breakdown, did you have kind of an estimate of like the cost per given area, or?
No,
Okay.
but I can. So we have our pen stocks. They're costing us in the range of 50 to 80, depending on the year and how many weeks we're using on them. And the pen stocks are this area. Do we know the size of that area?
I don't know.
I'm not sure, but I know the size of that area. But it's taking 50 goats 3 weeks to graze that location. It's got a variety of vegetation. It's got a very steep slope.
It's bigger than what these pictures show.
It's much bigger than this location. These pictures make that seem very small, but to give you a sense, each of those pipes, you can see the goat on top of the pipe, but each of those pipes is like taller than a human and wider than a human, which gives you a bit better sense of how wide those spaces are. But yeah, I don't have an exact cost breakdown. Again, if your provider will give you that best.
Yeah. So if anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I kind of had a question about the economics of these of the farmers who are kind of running these goatscaping companies. Are they usually, like, are the goats who are involved in these programs, are they generally kind of dedicated to goatscaping or vegetation removal, or are they also kind of functioning as like dairy farms and other reasons people keep livestock?
No, they're dedicated to the goatscaping.
Okay. Especially because they teach them to, the goats learn how to be most efficient and so you want the herd to have some of those goats that have had experience always in your herd, right? You wouldn't want to be replacing that herd over and over and that's where some of the economics, right? The goat skeeping time frame is not the whole year. So the economics of keeping them employed for the whole goat skeeping season at a rate that means that they are fed through the winter as well is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
so kind of having a critical mass of people who are engaging their services in the area is pretty important for their kind of
For your pricing.
viability. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Um, so just a question from Olivia. Are there any concerns by the farmers about goats with working or about the goats working in areas near or around water?
Well, actually, they were actually eating for Niagara Parks right along the Niagara River. And it's their instinct to save themselves. They didn't go in the water. We didn't have to fence or we them didn't have to fence the water side. He just fenced the outside where they didn't want him to run on the parkway and run on the road, for some vehicle. So there was no issue in that sense.
I mean, there is an issue in like if you're doing ditch work, like they will not go in water. So you've got to make sure you've given them little duct path, like boardwalks across that ditch. Because they'll eat it from either side, but they won't go in the water in the middle.
They actually made their own little bridges by bending over, the dry stalks that there were no nutritional value in there. And so they actually tromped that down to make their own little paths across the ditch with the water.
Funny.
They're pretty resourceful.
They are, yeah. But yeah, like a river kind of acts like a fence. They will not go in a river.
So I guess, so if you have Phragmites in areas where it's like kind of half in water and half out water, they're not going to tackle the stuff that's kind of
the goats are only helpful to your land-based Phragmites. They will not. They will be not doing your wetlands for you.
All right, that makes sense.
Yeah. Unless you can train them to do it from goat boats, but we haven't tried that.
I guess a question about kind of another tricky situation is like around the roadside removals and if they might be a viable alternative to roadside spraying programs.
Again, you'd have to sort out your, the safety of the goat, right? You want to make sure that they're not in a position where there's a risk of them ending up on the road or if it's a high risk area for a vehicle ending up with them in the not road would be important to consider, right? And then access, right? How are you getting your goats to this area? And then I guess supervision, how are they being supervised in that area? But I mean, yes, they can do roadside ditches. Again, you just need to figure out the logistics.
Okay. Are there any other questions from the audience?
One thing I will note, you would not want to deploy goats in a location where you had like Phragmites encroaching on a species you really wanted to keep. Like they will eat all the vegetation. And so that
is a consideration. We have fenced around the swamp rose mallow on the parkway to save them, but it's something to consider.
If you need, you might need to do exclusion fencing around particular species you want to protect because they will eat everything,
or use the dogs.
Oh yeah. Do you know about cattails or typha? I wonder if they might be too wetland. If
they will eat cattails,
they'll eat cattails. Okay.
Yeah. So because in a ditch where there's cattails, they'll eat the cattails as well.
There was in the first
test ditch, there was a bit of cattails at one end, and they ate those too. But interestingly, the cattails came back stronger than the Phragmites did after that.
Interesting. And in those sites where you had like a lot of success in eradication in the kind of first years, have you been monitoring those sites since then?
Yep. So we now sort of monitor our sites generally, and we're working on on improving that concept and how we do mapping. But we are, keeping some monitoring of where the Phragmites is on site, and also the areas where we have worked. We're sort of tracking how long is it taking before it comes back into that area, because it is coming back into those areas, because we didn't, like our ditch, we didn't have the entire ditch treated by the goats. We just had a section of it treated. So there's frag some further along. It's in much less dense, but and then there's also right next to us, there's an MTO ditch on the other side of the fencing, which is full of frag.
Yeah, they haven't done any control there.
They haven't done any control there. Yeah. So it's gonna blow back in. That being said, 4 years after the fact, there was less than 10%.
It's at it's at a manageable level that they can actually mow it, but until it gets back to the, worse, or not that to the point where it was, but then the goats will have to come back in to do some maintenance.
Yeah, and our mowing team is learning from the goat program a little bit, and they now try and get out there and mow when the Phragmites has just got to just prior to its seed head, and then they get it, mow it. They're now trying to do that, and that's, helping in the areas where you're going back to the mowing as maintenance. That helps to make sure that if any Phragmites is showing up, that we're trying to weaken it.
Great. Okay. Well, I think we've run through our questions. I guess are there any kind of like websites or places where people can follow the goat program at all, or?
Actually, well, the other two companies, I'm pretty sure that they have Instagram, and because we're OPG, they don't really want us to do that.
Yeah.
But the other, I can't even remember what they're called. Honestly, if you Google it,
Goats Ontario.
You'll find it easy.
You'll find them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we should all Google Goatscaping Ontario, and we can find out more.
Yeah.
And I think there was a question about where this presentation will be available, and it should be available on the River Institute YouTube page. So we'll try to get it up there and make it available. So yeah, I think we can bring it to a close. So I just want to say thank you so much again to Meredith and Nancy, and thanks to everyone for joining us. And we'll see if we can maybe try to schedule extend our mini webinar series and schedule a few more speakers. So.
And if there's any other questions, please contact Meredith or myself. We'd be very happy to answer them.